Okay, hey, welcome to another episode of On the Wrist from Off the Cuff. Today we have a really cool vintage Casio for you guys today. This one, of course, I purchased myself. This one is actually for my young son, who is 9 years old, turning 10 this November. So I'm excited to get this review done so I can get this piece on his wrist. He has a whole collection of Casios that you guys have seen mostly featured on this channel before, and actually talking to him tonight over dinner, he was expressing that he would be interested to maybe do a collection kind of review, state of the collection with his Casio. So I thought that was pretty cool. Definitely, leave a comment down below if that's something you'd be interested to check out. Essentially, a little bit about the brand. Casio was founded back in 1974, and their first watch was the Casio Tron. They are, of course, Japanese in origin, and they're known for their wide range of digital offerings, from the likes of G-Shock, Edifice, and the Oceanus lines. Now, this particular type of watch I consider a digital watch. Some key common characteristics and styling when you're looking for a digital watch. Of course, you're going to want that non-analog digital readout of the timing information. But other than that, there's plenty of room and range for kind of you to get whatever you like. This is the Casio Vintage A100 WE-1A, and this is from their A100 series, and it's pretty sweet. It's actually a reproduction of the first F100, which was Casio's first resin case model, and design has just been updated, in this more modern version, while really retaining the distinctive layout of those F100s with those front forward-facing buttons, as well as the other Casio vintage metal elements like this great stainless steel bracelet. Now, the awesome thing about this watch is that it's, very affordable, $54.95 direct from Casio. So a lot of different options. I didn't buy this direct from Casio. They're still, honestly, by the time I'm filming this at that time, it's actually kind of hard to find them in stock. So I ended up having to import one in from the UK here to my location in Southern California. But this thing is totally cool and very worth it in my opinion. So let's go ahead, zoom the camera out, get this piece in hand, and take a closer look. Okay, guys, take a look. As you can see, very handsome, catches the light really well. Even though this is a resin case, it does have some great lines, bevels, and shapes there. Everything is quite nice. I love aesthetically the layout, the vintage design. Very handsome, almost retro in terms of what people thought the future would look like. So very, very cool. And of course, with the shape, the scale is actually really important because square watches tend to wear a little bit bigger. So this width here is 32.7 millimeters in diameter, with a 9.3 millimeter height in terms of the thickness, and then it's only 40.5 millimeters lug to lug. So on a small wrist, this will absolutely hug it, which is why it's a great candidate for my son's young wrist at 9 years old. Although he's a pretty big boy, so he can definitely rock things a little bit larger, but I think this look is really nice for him. And of course, at the price point, I really don't have to worry too much or lose any sleep on in terms of if he loses something or destroys it from that standpoint. But he does, he does, I wouldn't say he takes care of his watches, but he doesn't lose them. He's very aware of them, and he does consider himself a young Casio collector / aficionado, so that's a lot of fun. In terms of this chrome finished resin case, you can see without the buttons on the side, you just get a different experience. It just has some clean bevels. Oh, not clean, a little fingerprinty from me. So let me give those a quick wipe here off camera. Bring it back. As you can see there, guys, very nice. Reflects the light really wonderfully, so really a different experience than a lot of the Casio watches that you're used to with the more signature layout. This one has just kind of a real fun about it in general. I want to say this design might have even been featured in a few movies along the way. Aliens, I believe, being one of them, but don't quote me on that. Unless I'm correct, then absolutely quote me on that. And if I'm absolutely wrong, then feel free to correct me down in the comments below. Now, in terms of the details here, you're getting 18mm lugs, which isn't which isn't uncommon within this range, which makes sense because then you can fit other 18mm lug straps from various other Casios on here, and you can see that it does flare out. So there's the lug right here, and then there's the little flare. Now that flare, in terms of the way that that tapers down, is that it's essentially 20.8mm at this first link, and then it tapers down to a very lovely 14.8mm at the clasp. So again, for smaller wrists, this is going to look very nice. Also is very refined and also kind of drives home the retro aesthetic. And then the clasp is a slide clasp, as you guys have seen here. So essentially you can just slide this up and down. It has a lock feature, and then all you got to do is you get it to hook there. And of course, I'm not doing it well on camera. And then you snap, and then bam, this thing is all set. Very, very handsome. And as you can see, in terms of sizing, for my 7¼ inch wrist, actually, I've been wearing my watches a little bit higher than usual. So I'm probably even closer to 7.5, considering where on the wrist I've been wearing. But you can see that it is, pretty well extended. And although there is a little bit of extra room, for somebody else, I don't think anybody would ever need it, because honestly, somebody with a wrist that's much bigger than mine probably wouldn't want to wear a watch of this size too often anyway. And the nice thing is you do have quite a few different strap options if you do, because 18mm isn't completely uncommon. And then if you did want to do some type of OEM plus update, you absolutely do have tons of options that are going to have this kind of 18mm with plus flare action that will absolutely wear wonderfully. So with that said, let's go ahead, get this piece on the wrist and see how it wears. All right, guys, as you can see on my 7¼ inch wrist, this thing actually wears remarkably well. I know some of you are probably thinking 32.7, that sounds really small, but because of the square shape, it really renders wonderfully on the wrist. And you can see, thanks to that flare out at the 18mm lug, having that 20mm and some change flare does help kind of fill in the gaps. And you can see even up close here, of course, it's going to appear a little bit bigger, but not oversized even then. And you can see the way that the light really plays on this bracelet type. Very nice and very in vogue right now. And you can see it really captures the light. It almost has a gradation effect to it as the light rolls over. You can see it is nice and thin at under 10mm of thickness, only 9.3mm height there. Very, very nice. And you can see even on my larger wrist, this thing doesn't appear too undersized. I mean, I will say, admittedly, on a human body, not just a floating arm, it's going to appear probably a little bit small, but generally when you're looking at just a wrist shot here, for context, something like this would just really fit in. And then, if I was, I guess, depending on how I was dressed, maybe if I was a little bit more vintage-esque, maybe a little more 90s, late 80s era, this thing would probably actually fit the bill pretty well. So pretty cool there. Let's go ahead and give it a shot in terms of lighting it up with the lights on here. So probably not going to give you the best choice to see that. Maybe if I get it really, really close. There we go. You can see. But we'll get to that, I guess, a little bit more in depth when it comes to kind of the loom shot low light transition. Of course, there's no loom, a traditional loom anyway. There's just pretty much the illumination button, which we'll be able to show you guys in the dark here. So with that said, let's go ahead and get this piece off the wrist, laid out nicely for some loom shots, low light transition, and closing thoughts. All right, guys, let's go ahead and hit the lights here. Won't go pitch black because there's no loom, but I did want to press the little illuminator button. You guys can get a look there. Very fast, but So very cool, nice bright orange tone there. But what I do like to do also is get some of the light transition, and typically it's just to kind of get an idea of how this watch or any watch that I feature on the channel is going to render in less than optimal lighting, as well as just seeing the way that the bracelet case and dial will hold light in different ways and how different colors will render when you're not out in the middle of a field enjoying direct sunlight, because a lot of times you'll be coming in and out of buildings, of course, maybe walking underneath the shade of a tree or an overpass, or maybe just spending time in your favorite automobile. So it is nice to see kind of the way the watch renders in different types of lighting situations, to include some very harsh lighting. Let's say like here, where you're getting really high contrast. And you can see the brushing on those links is actually really holding up, especially considering that they're just hollow folded over links. They do a nice job of really just selling some great texture on here. Look at the way the light just plays over those links. Very, very cool, very handsome setup, and I'm really looking forward to seeing this thing out in the wild on my son's wrist. Now, closing thoughts here, guys, on the wrist. You know, it wears very similar to the classic A168WA-1. It's a little bit thinner in terms of its profile wise. I guess it's less square and just a little bit, it's a touch more rectangle in a vertical standpoint, but I think that also helps the watch flow a little bit nicer, as well as it still does have a pretty small lug to lug, but it has a really nicely kind of hooded lug design layout, which flows really beautifully. In terms of model variations, guys, there's also an available version which is kind of all gold, or also a gray anthracite style, and they all pretty much are going to color the case and the bracelet, so you can get this with an all gold style case with a gold style bracelet, or you can get it with that kind of gray anthracite coating as well, which also looks very handsome and probably is a little bit sleeker, while the gold is a little bit dressier, and this one is kind of the in-between kind of ultimate versatility wise model here, which I think it does a great job of. In terms of comparable models, guys, there's a lot of fashion watches charging honestly a lot more money to tap into, you know, this brand of nostalgia. And you know, I think these little Casios offer a more authentic and purified experience and a take on that. So not to say you know, that the Nixons of the world aren't doing a good job kind of capturing this aesthetic. I'll just say that, you know, for a lot less money, you can get something like this, which is actually, you know, pretty classic and collectible, and just as much, I think, of a conversation starter as something that's more modern and larger and upscaled, even with improved you know, functionality as well as improved build quality. You know, there's a trade-off, and here you're getting for $54.95, quite a good deal. I think I've only paid somewhere around 40 something for this thing, so it's, yeah, you're getting a lot of watch for the money. No, it's nothing crazy. I mean, the crystal's mineral, but it's not resin, so that's cool, but it's not also not sapphire, right? So it's definitely far from some high-end piece, but it's a lot of fun, and I can see why so many people collect these. I can see why my son loves these so much and was so excited to kind of get this thing out of the box and really start playing with it. So yeah. Hey guys, bottom line on this one, this is just another Casio vintage model that perfectly does the retro digital watch, you know, and that's a really popular space right now, and some people will overspend, and I'm one of them. You know, I'm actually looking at that really cool all titanium G-Shock square model that they recently will actually be releasing this year, I think in November. So it is all blacked out, and it has this kind of Japanese mech inspired aesthetic. It's very, very cool. So I don't know, hopefully I'll be able to get my hands on that one. But yeah, that's very expensive. It's something like 1650 or something like that, so just under 2 grand. And that thing is sweet, don't get me wrong, and it's 200 meters of water resistance, titanium, all those great things. But in terms of tapping into that retro vintage premium-ish aesthetic, this watch for a lot less gives you a very similar play. So I think that's kind of fun, and hopefully you'll be seeing wristwatch check in the future on my Instagram. So definitely check that out, or maybe me and my son can do matching Casio wristwatch checks. So let me know what you guys think in the comments below. If you like the video, please do hit like, and if you haven't already, please do subscribe for more content just like this. Thanks, guys.